Welcome to the Finance and Operations Committee meeting and the Education and Pupil Services meeting. I'm going to turn it over to the Finance and Operations Chair.
Please begin with an overview of your agenda items for this evening, sir.
Thank you, sir. On Finance and Operations Committee agenda has three items that we're bringing to the board and public this evening. Agenda item number one is an informational presentation only. Our infamous Director of Technology, Mr. Holinsky, will provide the board his annual update on the current projects and the future goals related to our IT plan. The second item is informational as well. Mr. McGilvery and Mr. Leaf will be here this evening to provide a report on our annual water testing. The third agenda item is an item that will have informational and board consensus areas, which we will go through at the end of the meeting after public comment. I'll address the board where the areas for specific board consensus that we are requesting for. Essentially, it's a review of our capital projects update, plans for projects that we currently have going through our general fund, our capital reserve fund, future projects that we'll be looking for approval for to move on out of our capital reserve fund, an update on our other projects fund, which relates to our 2018 bond financing, and then lastly, we'll be looking for approval for areas to be able to go out and cost various different projects that would be related to a future financing for the district. So this evening, I open up to the one and only Mr. Holinsky. Take it away, sir.
I don't know, Mr. Grant, it's a tough act to follow, you know? So what am I going to do next year when you're not here for that, right? So I just want to give the board and the public an update of what IT's been doing for the last couple of years. The first couple of years I've been here, we've been focusing on the infrastructure. And now that we seemingly have that pretty stable, the next part of our comprehensive plan was to get the one-to-one devices for our students. So that's going to start off with, throw one to start off with. So our goal was to get one-to-one. So starting in 17-18 school year, we added 4,350 devices, including our labs. So that was the big push, at least to get us jump-started on where we wanted to be with technology devices in the district. So the labs were like our libraries at the high school, our business labs, our Microsoft labs that we did. So we got all those updated as well. And that's what the 4,350 numbers include, as well as the big influx of Chromebooks that we started with in 17-18. And then this year in 18-19, we've added 2,255 devices, again, updating some more labs in some of the middle schools and some of the elementary schools. But the biggest part of that is the Chromebook initiative that we're trying to get into place. And then over the next 3 years, we plan to add at least 2,000 more devices so that we can get to that one-to-one of every student having a device available while they're in the district. So this first chart I wanted to show everybody was what we have right now per building with the enrollment numbers that we have. The enrollment numbers I've taken were from the December board report for the buildings, and that's what these numbers are. Obviously, they fluctuate with kids coming and going. But our goal in this second year of the initiative is to go to at least 40% in the buildings. So you can see in that column there, percent to one-to-one, where we're at. You will notice there at the K Center, it's only at 0.326%, but you got to remember the K Center has morning and afternoon kindergarten classes. So it's not like we have all those the kids in the building at the same time. So we're sharing those in the morning and sharing those in the afternoon. The other number, the Drexel Hill Middle School, is a little light there too. But what we've done at that building is consolidated a lot of the old Mac carts that we had that were still viable to use. So we put them into one building to concentrate them there to get us up to speed. And then next year you'll see where we're going to be increasing on that. So as we go into the 2019-20 year with the budget that I had spoken to Mr. Grant about for next year, what our needs are, our goal is to get to 60% at that point for a one-to-one. So we're in our third year. We want to be at 60% at least for all our buildings. Again, I wanted to point out the kindergarten center is going to be at 0.423, but again, because of those numbers. Now, at Drexel Hill, you'll see is back up to the 60%, and we're getting a big influx of Chromebook carts with the Discovery curriculum that's coming in place. So each middle school is going to have 12 carts coming from that grant that's going to give us a big push to get those numbers up to date at the middle school level. And so that's going to give us 7,777 Chromebooks and 260 carts. That's going to be an increase of 74 carts and 2,258 devices for next year. Okay. So a couple things on that. I just want to make sure everybody's aware of. The kindergarten Chromebooks, when we first put the Chromebooks in the kindergarten center, we had the regular touchpad or keyboard ones. So that was kind of confusing for the kids and a little tough transition. So talking to Ms. Williams at the kindergarten center, we put the actual touch devices in there because kids were used to their cell phones and iPads. So the Chromebooks at the kindergarten center and the kindergarten classes at the other buildings as well, Hillcrest and Primus and Westbrook, are the touch Chromebooks. So it's to try to make it a little bit easier for them as they transition to the other grade levels. The cyber school students, I didn't have that on the previous slide, because obviously the cyber school kids are going to have a one-to-one Chromebook already. So we've been working with Candace in the cyber school program to make sure there's a Chromebook available when the kids have their needs for there. The elementary libraries, I've been working with Ms. Kelly about that. We had some funds available to put a full cart of 30 at each building. So that's happening right now as we speak. The carts came in this week. The Chromebooks themselves will be in. So each library is now going to have a dedicated Chromebook cart of 30 devices. So a classroom can come in, and then it can have a machine for the kids in there. So that was a big initiative for them this year as well. And I mentioned about the 24 middle school carts coming up for the social studies program. And I did want to point out, Home and School also purchased a cart for Hillcrest. And I want to make sure that we're aware of that. When that comes in, that request comes through our department in IT to make sure that the devices match what we want to do, and also to make sure we have the filtering software on there, and also the Chrome management piece that's on there as well to get that going. So all those are the same devices that the other kids are having, so Home and School is putting their money where we're going. Okay, so now the next part of our update has been big security plans to get things going. So this year, we've added 18 camera views in the cafeteria. Now, the reason why I say views there, because some of our cameras have 2 or 3 cameras in them. So that's why I'm saying the views versus the number of cameras there. So with Aramark had an old, outdated camera system in place that only they could see in their buildings. So they had some issues with it. So instead of just replacing their devices, they worked with us, and we worked with the security department to put those cameras on our backbone on our network. So not only can the cafeteria people see the cameras downstairs, the security office has the view as well. So when there's an issue and they're being recorded on our devices, and they can get to those a little bit quicker. We're adding 29 camera views at the high school. That's going to happen in about 2 weeks. And then 10 more camera views down at the golf building. The golf building had an old, outdated system that wasn't working any longer. And so we're able to get some funds to get that done as well, to make sure that we have some safety and security down there. And along those lines, we installed new computers for each building security person to see the cameras, and we trained them on that. And we put the new Raptor system in place as well. There was a new software, and we had new scanners in place for those. So the buildings needed some new devices there. We were able to update that. And then we did train the building personnel, the security people in the buildings, and also a number of the principals so they can see the cameras on their devices down there and get them up to speed. Okay, so as we get into the budget as well for 2019, I mentioned about the Chromebooks and the Chromebook carts. The other big pushes that we're trying to get done is stay on top of is our student information system and our e-finance systems. So we have some updates coming up from the company, and we got to make sure we stay a couple levels current, or at least one level behind, so that they keep our support. So we're at that point where we have to update eSchool to a new version 4.1, and the e-finance is going to be up to 5.3. And along those lines, our new cognitive support writer is up to version 11, and we want to update that to keep that current with, keep that current with our packages. We are going to work with the security department to increase our cameras and find out where their specific needs are. I know we want to get a big push down the elementary level to make sure some other outside doors and stairwells are covered in those places. So that's we'll work with the security office to make sure where their high priorities are. And then the last piece, not to leave it at the end, but the projectors. Last January, I gave you guys an update how many projectors we had outdated and where they were at with that. So we have installed about 70 new projectors throughout the district, and that's a slower process. When they die, we're addressing those at that point, and we're making sure we're trying to get those as soon as we can. It's just a slower process to get those done if we have to put new cabling in there with new wiring and new electricities as far as that goes. So that gives us a little bit of an update on the projects we got coming up. So open up any questions you guys might have for me as we move forward.
I have a couple.
Sure.
The shelf life for the Chromebooks is how long?
So we have a year warranty on the Chromebooks that we're purchasing. So with the cost of those, they're more of a commodity for us, so we're not buying long-term warranties on those. So we've been kind of fortunate so far that, we're experiencing less than 1% repair rates on those. It's making sure that the teachers are staying on top of them with the kids in the classrooms, and so far so good with where we're at.
Okay, my concern was the ones you purchased like maybe in year one. At the end of the 5-year plan,
And
what will be the condition of those, and would they need to be replaced before your 1-to-1 ratio is reached? So I was just curious.
That's definitely a plan. This is new territory for us, so we haven't had them that long, so we'll have to see how that's going to go. And we're staying on top of them. We are repairing them, and when we have some that can't be repaired, we're taking the parts that are good and making them into one. So we're trying to stay on top of that. But that's going to be an issue as we move forward, especially as we get up to 12,000 devices with the support staff that we have, making sure we can handle that and keep that going.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank
Hey, Lee?
you. I have two questions.
Sure.
First of all, I'd like to thank the Hillcrest Home and School for purchasing the cart. I'm just curious, how much do they run?
Well, we budget around $300 for a Chromebook. Now, the reason why we do that, the Chromebook itself is one price, and then we have to buy the Google Chrome administration piece, and then also the filtering software. And then that gives us a little wiggle way in case we need to buy some headphones or some other devices for some of these testing that we do. So that's what we're budgeting for. And then the cart itself, for a cart that can handle up to 36
Right.
devices, that's about we budget $1,000 for that. It's about $980. So we have that cart, and they can handle 36 devices. So the cart's $1,000, and then each Chromebook, we budget $300.
Okay, thank you. And the update to the Raptor system?
Yes.
What was that tightening up, like?
Well, new
some
versions of the
system?
software come out, so we got to stay current with that, or else they're not going to support us. So it may have some things in there that don't really pertain to us, but we did have to get some software updates for the scanners, so we had to buy new scanners for them, and also for some of the printing processes as well. Sure.
Just make a comment. I am very pleased to see that the carts are going to be in the libraries. I guess you know me, I'm a library freak. But it's so important for our students to learn how to use the computers and research, that you just don't go to encyclopedia, that you go to journals, go to all kinds of places, and the library is a great place for that education to happen, and I certainly appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, I think that the libraries are going to be research centers and media centers, and you see that trend across the nation as far as all libraries at that place, and that's what we got to look forward to here as well.
Bob,
Yes, sir.
good job. I appreciate your efforts since you've come on board to get us to where we are. I think to follow up to Mr. Brown's question, that I'd like to see, and if we can get this back to the board for sustainability purposes, because I think his question that he asked is a good one, is that we try to get to the top of the mountain, and for some reason we struggle to get there because we'll have 500, 600 computers that are outdated and we have to replace them, and that will replace the other budget. Some form of lease to purchase for our students. Maybe moving forward in the next year or two, one of our game plans could be, while these are in place in the schools while they're there, that by, in 2 years, all fifth graders starting in fifth grade, as we go through the curricular aspects, some kind of lease to purchase that it's their piece of technology. And then we would help those parents and those students turn that back in over time at a low rate. Using these Chromebooks would be a good way for us to look at sustainability with that too.
Okay.
That it's their own device, and that we help them purchase that device.
And one thing we got to be cautious on that is if we give it to them or make it their own, or if they would bring their own in there, since they may own it, we have to support it and what other software they're putting on there that then we're going to have to worry about if we have to support some issues, or if they can't use it in classroom or at home, how that's going to get done. So I'd be glad to give that information to you.
I think to get on top of that is in response to yours concern about the ownership. It maybe, the family owns it, but this district manages it until graduation or something like that. And there's a discount applied to that because the district is, the discount applied to that because the district is managing it. So something to think about. I did have a question that kind of piggybacked on your questions, Ed and Dan, which was how much is, for these purchases, how much is budget, how much is grant? I don't need specific, just like kind of percentages or ballpark. Is it all budget?
Right now, all, the ones that we purchased so far have all been out of the operating budget from our lease to purchase program that we have here.
Okay, aside from the Hillcrest.
The grant coming in for the Discovery Grant for next year for the 12 carts at the 2 middle schools each, that's going to be from, I think, a grant from the curriculum office.
That is the legislative grant that we received. That's where those Chromebooks will be purchased through.
Right, the one-time grant. Okay, so that covers the 2 middle schools, and then.
Yeah, that's 12 carts at each middle school coming up for this upcoming year, correct?
I could just add, I attended a meeting at the IU a couple months ago, and I brought it back to Ms. Kelly in the curriculum department, that the IU was going after grant money. I think it was released today. I know, Rachel, you had communicated about a STEM initiative with computer science. We don't know what the dollar amount is. There's about, I think, $20 million up in the air. Upper Darby decided to jump on board with that grant. As soon as that dollar amount gets released, that would be something we consider also as a grant, a STEM-related grant from the governor's office that we've applied for with other local school districts. And if we get that dollar amount, we would offset some of these costs with that as well.
Right, I guess my concern is going back to the one-time funding and the sustainability concerns that you guys brought up, is that, I mean, it's great, right, saves us this time, but it's, long-term, it gets tougher,
Correct.
I just want to thank you for taking this on, because I know, 3 years ago, we were talking about how important this was for the school district, and I do think it is making a difference in our classrooms and for our students every day, so thank you.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Just one quick go back. I just had a different take on, what Dan mentioned as far as providing the Chromebooks for the families when they're at the end of their shelf life. Maybe we charge them $50. They're really obsolete at that point, or they still have use because they're Chromebooks and they retain their value. But for our needs, I would think we would just turn it over to the family or let them purchase them for $50, and then we relinquish any responsibility of managing it. Here's a computer for you, $50, inexpensive, and you can use it for your needs. It gives you access to the internet. There's really no software that you can install on it.
Correct.
So, I think it's low maintenance, and it's a nice way to help them gain hardware.
There are some districts out there that are giving the students, like for example, in the 9th grade, and they keep it for the 4 years, and upon graduation, they're letting them keep that and take it to college with them. Now, some of those districts are charging an annual rental, they'll call it a rental fee or a maintenance fee, $50 a year type of thing, then the kids have it at the end of that year. So that's some of the things we can do and see where we can come up with some strategic ways.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the board or comments from the board? Thank you very much. Very informative presentation. Thank you for your work. Mr. Grant, you want to go on to agenda?
We'll move forward to, Bob, thank you very much.
Yep.
Agenda item number 2. Joe, Tim?
Good evening, board members, staff, and community. Tonight, we are bringing to our community's attention the laws, the testing methods, and results of our annual drinking water testing for lead and copper. In 2014, the Pennsylvania Department of Health found children in 18 communities across Pennsylvania who tested positive for high lead levels. While the tragedy in Flint, Michigan brought national attention to the danger of lead in water supplies, the department's findings revealed that children in Pennsylvania had an extended risk of lead exposure in public schools, daycares, and housing. This information spurred state legislatures to consider possible ways to combat lead exposure and remediate lead. By adding lead testing into the school code, the legislature believes they are moving forward in helping our children avoid lead exposure. In June of 2018, Act 39 Section 3.1, also known as the Lead and Copper Rule, was added to the Public School Code of Pennsylvania. This act states that beginning in the 2018-19 school year and every school year thereafter, school facilities where children attend school may be tested for lead levels in the drinking water. Any school facility whose testing shows lead levels in excess of the maximum contaminant level goal or milligrams per liter as set by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's National Primary Drinking Water Regulations shall immediately implement a plan to ensure no child or adult is exposed to lead contamination drinking water and that alternative sources of drinking water be made available. It is very important to note that this is not a mandatory act. Should a school district opt not to test for lead, then by law, it must hold a public meeting where discussion of lead issues in school facilities is addressed. We, however, will continue our practice of testing each school building yearly. Our test method, the test procedure is strict and must be fully complied with to render an accurate reading. Samples must be collected first thing in the morning prior to usage of water throughout the building. Ideally, the water should sit in the pipes unused for at least 8 hours, but not more than 18 hours before a sample is taken. Our custodian shall collect water from the school kitchen, the nurse's office, a first-floor water fountain, a second-floor water fountain, and then again, the same first-floor water fountain. Once collected, the samples are taken by a school representative to Aqua America, where the samples are tested. Aqua provides readings for each water draw and lists the amount of lead and copper in each sample. We are very pleased to report that all samples collected this year fell below the U.S. EPA's drinking water regulation standards of 0.015 milligrams per liter for lead and 1.3 milligrams per liter for copper. Please bear in mind that even if the testing was in excess of the threshold, that is not a violation of the Act, but can trigger other testing requirements. Should we receive a result in excess of the threshold, it is our practice to immediately retest the faucet and have that sample tested as well. False positives do occur from time to time. Full results by school are available on board docs. Any questions?
Mind. Not that I anticipate any positive results, but if we did have a positive result, does our current policy say we will retest that specific outlet or retest, say, the entire building?
So yes, if we get a negative, we will retest the same,
Okay.
we'll shut it down, retest it, and no one will use it until we get a positive result back.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are you guys, so I'm looking at the results for Garrettford, the kitchen.
I beg your pardon?
I'm looking at the results for Garrettford,
Right.
the kitchen. So do you want to speak to that?
So if you're looking at the lead or the copper for Garrettford, so our friends at Aqua provide us the results on forms, each form for each draw. You'll note that the copper is listed in milligrams per liter, but they list the lead in UG per liter. And what that means is that you divide that by 1,000 to get your actual number.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate the information. Happy to hear that we're in compliance, safe.
Our third and final agenda this evening is a discussion on our capital projects and process and a request for to move forward on certain areas for projects and to work with engineers on future projects. Get approval from the board. We have several different funds through which we're currently operating capital projects. In the current school year, bid specs are in process or near completion. Discussions have been had with the board related to replacements of the PA systems and clock replacement as noted above. The project costs are coming in estimated about $494,000, including the architect fees. As discussed previously, on the capital improvement plan, the PA systems alone without the clock replacements were $450,000. So the pricing on this is estimated is much better than what was anticipated in the capital improvement plan. This evening, we will be requesting from board approval to move forward to a bid for this project. The second item is the fire door replacement at the high school. The bid specs are in development. When costs have been compiled, we'll come to the board for approval to move forward to a bid. Based on the capital improvement plan, those costs are $300,000. Our capital reserve fund, which is otherwise known as Fund 32. Currently, we have $2,085,000 built up into our capital reserve plan. At the end of last year, we only had approximately $600,000. Included in this dollar amount is the $500,000 transfer from the general fund revenues were collected through the 2018-19 school real estate taxes. The board approved approximately a 0.5% increase in taxes to support the capital reserve. An additional $1 million was moved from the 2017-18 financial numbers, and it was moved in, and the board approved that in October to be moved into the capital reserve, and that's how we were able to build up the fund. This slide is solely informational. This will give you the idea of priority one projects that we've completed for the year to date through the capital reserve. There are other projects that are in development that we're still working with architects to build designs and specs for the playground and at Hillcrest and Highland Park. This evening, I will be asking the board for approval for the following request. I provided the board a list of the capital improvement plan. In there is a legend where I've highlighted by color to associate the projects that we're requesting out of the priority one designations to move forward on. As you can see, majority of the work is doing a lot of concrete work. To the major projects that will probably require us to work with engineers will be our fire alarm system replacement at Highland Park and Primos. The moisture mitigation at the kindergarten will require us to work with engineers and/or architects as well. Majority of the work will just simply allow us just to go to bid for the concrete work. The natatorium roof is next roof that's in need of repair. I will be requesting that the board would use the capital reserve for this work and so that we do not have to include it in our budget in the general fund for next year. The third area of capital projects is our Fund 39, or other capital projects. These are projects that were funded through the 2018 bond financing. As you can see, these are the projects cost at the three schools to date. I'm placing a reserve for architectural and engineering fees for the completion of these projects, in addition to potential overruns. The board approved us to allow us to work with Murata, Maine to build bathroom specs and designs for the Upper Darby High School. Based on what we have spent and the reserves held so far, we spent about $3.59 million. We have from the financing remaining about $1.32 million. Marana, Maine has provided designs, they're developing bid specs, and have provided estimated costs for the Upper Darby High School bathroom replacements in the C wing, the B wing, the B building, cafeteria, and gym lobby bathrooms. Estimated cost pre-bid for these projects is about $1.45 million. Bids may come down below that. This does not include engineering fees as well. The bid will provide the district the ability to include only those projects that will fall within the parameters of the remaining funding that is available. This is an informational piece only. Lastly, we're coming to the board for a request to engage architects for the planning, design, bid specs, development, and the costing out for these various projects. All secondary schools, athletic complexes, including fields, tracks, stadium seating, and locker rooms. Beverly Hills Middle School, window replacement. Garrettford Elementary School, window replacement. As you can see in your capital improvement plan, there is no costing out for the locker rooms. That was part of the original plan, and no costing out for for working on the fields, either enhancing the fields through creating irrigation systems to maintain the fields or a turf replacement. Just without looking at those, we're looking about $6.2 million in projects based upon the numbers that are in the capital improvement plan. Bids may come in actually below that. Turf fields and the other work, I'm not going to guesstimate what that number would be. We would leave that up to the architects to come back, allow us to come back to the board with numbers. Once we come back to the board with numbers, at that point in time, we would then be looking at a number to design a financing for these projects, and then work with RBC to come back with the impacts it will have to the district over the future. For the next year, depending on the timing, if we are going to move in that direction, we would probably provide a contingency, as that number may not be known by June 30th, for what the approximate cost would be during the next fiscal year. We did the same thing for the 2018 financing this year. So, at this point in time, that concludes agenda item number 3's discussion on capital projects.
Thank you. Do we have any comments or questions from the board?
Thank you, Mr. Grant. I was just wondering, with the projects that involve the playground equipment, I know we've talked about that before, what pieces are in place to determine when playground equipment is needed for replacement? Particularly, I was looking at the one line item that came from the high school, and I know that's for the daycare program. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so how is it identified that these pieces need to be replaced?
Part came through an insurance audit.
Okay, so that takes place yearly?
That took place last year, has not taken place so far this year. But part of it were recommendations that came out of an audit, an insurance audit. Last year, we brought this to the board about projects that we would like to bring through to the capital reserve. We also said that we like to get on a cycle of replacing the playgrounds at various schools, so many a year for so much cost. I believe that these are the two schools that were a priority with needs right now. Next year we have if you see it, under Fund 32 request, we have the playground equipment at the kindergarten center and the playground equipment at the high school. But moving forward, and Bywood too, we have some playground equipment replacement as well. But it's going to be planned over in the next several years to touch certain schools every year, okay? And try to bring them up to date. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
Two questions. For this year, for the Fund 32 request, just
Yes.
for the kindergarten center, what is moisture mitigation? I'm just not familiar with what that.
Our walls due to pointing it, is leaking water into the building. So we're planning on getting it repointed.
And then just for clarification for the Fund 39, this is just the first step in assessing kind of what we look at from a cost perspective and then determine a priority of where we're going to go following this?
With these projects
Yes.
right here, absolutely. These are areas where we felt the greatest priorities were. We're asking the board just to be able to go work with a firm to be able to come back to the board with what the costs were. And then be able to decide what we would like to work on. Certainly, if it goes up to $10 million, it may not be something we may be able to attack in 1 year. We may want to do this over a series of 2 years and 2 different financing. Timing's the issue, and the issuance on everything here as it relates to when the projects begin and when, et cetera. So absolutely, the board will have that decision to make once we're just asking to be able to work with the architects to come back to the board with those numbers.
There's two pieces. I think earlier, there's money for the high school bathrooms. When the money that we borrowed last year, the Fund 39 bond financing for 2018 was about a $5 million bond. The projects came in under the $5 million, so there's remaining money in that bond where the board and the district already borrowed money that should cover the cost to do the bathroom renovations that we had talked about last year at the high school. The part that you're bringing up now is Fund 39 future would be, does the board want to go out based on information coming back from bid? If we go out and we find out how much it's going to cost to improve the fields at Drexel Hill, Beverly Hills, the high school, the stadium complexes, all of that, and the windows that need to be replaced at Garriford and Bywood, does the board want to go out and issue another bond to find out what the rate would be to cover the cost of those as well? That's really what it come down to, would be another borrowing of money to cover those costs.
Well, this will have information.
Correct. And the other thing I'd like to say to add to this, and I will be calling a meeting, obviously, with members of the board and then Clifton Heights as well. On Friday afternoon, I met with our architects who were doing the work on Clifton Field. That work is pretty much completed. We'll be going public with that work as well. I did say to Clifton Heights that we would meet with that community to let them know that in advance of going to everybody else, just to share that. And then they also did some work, KCBA, to show us a future plan to do an elementary school on 69th Street, the cost of that and the size, renovations for Hillcrest, renovations for Garriford, and a new middle school in Clifton Field, and what the size would look like and the renderings for that. So I'll share that with the board. We'll talk about Clifton Heights, and then we'll share that with the public as well. That should conclude much of the facility study then to allow us to take some of the other bigger projects on that we have.
Thanks, Dan. Any other questions or comments from the board?
The Fund 39 project, I see a reserve for architect engineering overrun. That is overrun set aside for the above project, meaning Highland Park, Hillcrest, BHMS, and it's not. We're not planning on having it available for the high school bathroom.
In the event there's a changeover that we have to bring, that has to be done, and that would increase the costs that we already have approved. I'm just providing a cushion for that to occur. The engineering fees we are still incurring and will be incurring to these 3 other projects will be completed from the Net Associates. So I'm leaving a reserve for the potential costs that they may be over the next year and a half.
I was asking about, would that $150,000 of reserve be available to pay engineering fees for the bathrooms? If it's not all used up on the other project.
If it's not used up on the other projects.
But in the $1.4 million fee for the bathrooms, there's a overrun in fee included in the $1.4 million.
So it's quite,
They also have a recommendation of overages and fees of a similar dollar amount in their name in the bathroom work.
Okay, thank you.
I want to just thank you for all this hard work that everyone is putting into completing this facilities plan and coming up with a timeline and a plan for sorely needed repairs and building projects in this district. So thank you for all the hard work that everyone's putting into this.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, I think we're at the Time for public comment. So if you have a comment that you would like to make, please step up to the microphone and state your name, your address, and the agenda item that you have a comment on at this time. Okay, looks like there's no public comments. Mr. Grant?
Mr. Brown, I'll do a quick review of the evening. Agenda item number 1 was informational, no board action. Agenda item number 2 was informational as well. Agenda item number 3, I am asking for board consensus to move forward to a bid on the PA system replacements and clock replacements at the following 3 schools.
Do we have consensus? Do we agree? Yes.
For the capital reserve and the use of the funds that are there, I'm asking for board consensus to be able to go out to bid and/or engage architects on various projects that really have no time frame on where they need to be completed. Once we start, then they're not based upon a school year to be completed within, but it will allow us to start planning for the summer and the future. So do I have board consensus to be able to use $1 million, right now, $1,069,000 of the capital reserve?
Do we have board consensus? Yes. It's about half of what's there, right? Correct. A little more than half.
For these projects, yes, and
Right.
there's still about 140, so we would be down to 800,000.
Okay.
As we go through the budget process this year, I will once again be asking the board to make a provision in the
Replenish it.
tax assessment of allowing a 0.5 or about $500,000 to be able to continue funding the capital reserve. As you can see, these are a lot of projects which we do not have to budget for and raise taxes on, as we've already done that in this fund's building. So the whole idea is be able to use this fund to be able to accomplish those tasks. Lastly, for the potential future bond issuance, we're asking for board consensus to be able to engage architects for the planning, design, and bid spec development and the costing out of these 3 projects in these 3 areas.
I just have a question. I mean, I know that we had looked at the high school field years ago, becoming turf. I mean, were there any plans drawn up at that time to do that you can't go back?
We've had conversations for a while on this. At that period of time, the turf has changed, and the way that they use turf and the life of the turf has changed. So that's, 15, 20 years ago now, almost, that conversation. So the game has changed. If we resurface the track, which is needed, the reason why it's been held off is to do something with the high school football field, as an example. However, there's been a little bit of a shift. Is a turf field the way to go, or is it grass? Some places are going back to grass instead of turf. So one of the things we would like to do as we look at the complexes is some kind of agronomist or somebody to come in, look at the high school fields and our other complexes, see if it's an irrigation system, lifespan there, and then get a cost of that versus a turf complex and the lifespan of either one at all of our facilities, and get a rule of thumb of what we can upkeep and not. Some kind of a turf maintenance program or a turf field. But I can say the game has changed pretty much over the last 15 to 20 years as far as turf, the type of synthetic turf, the rubber, all that has changed.
And my question is, are you asking for approval to spend the money on the architect's engineering fees for the costing out, or approval to go out for a bond?
We're asking for approval to engage architects for the planning, which would require us to incur a cost for them to plan these to come in, yes. We're nowhere near that, we have to come back to the board with the financial information to allow you to decide what direction you want to go in order to determine what the financing the district would have to go out for.
Thank you.
Mr. Grant, isn't there also one more you want to request for the bathroom, the high school bathrooms, the Murata main architects? I don't think we went through that one yet.
Yes, sorry about that. Do we have board approval or consensus to move forward to go to bid for the high school bathrooms?
Okay.
So it looks in all areas we have approval from, consensus from the board to move forward.
That's correct.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
You're welcome. All right, I think that pretty much wraps it up. Motion is in order for adjournment of the Finance and Operations Committee meeting. All right, I think we're adjourned.